So, hieroglyphics and the ancient sky, remembering, assimilating, easing, forevering. A little over 40 years ago, and as we've been saying in the Bible, 40 years means a very long time. This 40 years ago, I had the youthful presumption to write an essay entitled A Reading of the Pyramid Texts, published in the Talbot's Pensée series, Immanuel Velikovsky Reconsidered. Reading in that title meant, of course, interpretation. Today, matured, I hope, by those 40 years, I will be giving you another reading of the pyramid texts and other Egyptian writings. You should be forewarned that by reading, I mean not only interpreting, but also a good measure of reading out loud with these texts and their incantatory rhythms. My interpretation is summed up in my 4 gerunds, verbal nouns, in my subtitle. So, remembering, assimilating, easing, forevering. These gerunds refer to structures of thought habitual to the priestly scribes who composed texts for the dead. The same structures of thought, I will argue, show us 4 fundamental and omnipresent ways in which Egyptian thought accommodated itself to cosmic catastrophes and ultimately learned to cease to fear them, to forget them. At its simplest, forgetting came to take the form of the fading away of an earlier meaning of a single hieroglyphic into a non-cataclysmic later meaning. Let's begin by looking at a single hieroglyphic on the title here, the so-called Eye of Horus. It is a falcon's eye. The vertical line and enclosed area to its left are plausibly enough interpreted by Egyptologists as the typical black line coming down from a falcon's head, though you will find other interpretations in this room. To the right, however, is a line curving in on itself, a curl. And this line is simply not to be found on falcons, I'm sure, because I checked with a cadet in the Falconry Club at the United States Air Force Academy, and with due diligence, he sent me copious falcon photos, in none of which was the mysterious curl to be seen. In recent work, Ev Cochran, whom I hoped would be here to speak after me, has argued that this curl is the hair of the comet Venus, whose rampage on Earth and sky he associates with the planet Mars. He argues forcibly in unpublished work, but also in a chapter on his recent 2010 on fossil gods and forgotten worlds, the chapter The Horus Star, that Horus is none other than the name for the planet Mars, and that the goddess Hathor is none other than the name for Venus. The curl on the eye of Horus, he argues, would be specifically depicting the hair of Venus in cometary form. The curl, Cochran points out, can be found on the red crown, one of the 2 crowns of the pharaoh, is commonly depicted as wearing, a mysterious curl moving up from the crown's base, and this curl can be found in representations accompanying other hieroglyphic texts independent of either the Eye of Horus or the red crown. Another such glyph is this is the second of my Horus with the red crown, the white crown together, and on the moving up from the right, the curl. Another such glyph is a disc with the famous uraeus affixed to it on the far left, a cobra that spit fire. We do not see such a thing in today's sky. The third glyph is a circle with 4 sets of parallel lines inside converging on its center. This is on the far right. Used in words for city or town. Its standard interpretation is of 2 crossroads intersecting enclosed in a disk, though there is no evidence that circular walls or axial streets intersecting at right angles bear any relation to the plan of a normal Egyptian city. Dave Talbot has shown the dominance of this figure in cultures around the globe and sees it as visible in the ancient sky and interpreted by different cultures as different forms. It does not in any obvious way depict the way Egyptians design cities. For Talbot, it is the celestial city, one of his many archetypes which are counterintuitive because they are not seen in today's world. My final glyph, the second from the left, is the simplest, a circle with a dot in the middle to be found as part of the spelling of the word Ra. It is used in everyday phrases such as Ra-Neb, translated every day, and fitting the context as such. But why a dot in the middle of the circle? My thesis can be summed up and symbolized by the last of these hieroglyphs. If this glyph, as Dave Talbot has been arguing for 40 years, once depicted the presence of a smaller planet in front of a much more massive one, and we've had the great pleasure of seeing this in glorious color and just now, a presence of a planet aligned between it and our pole, and therefore seen from the Earth as it's at its center. The larger disk, the larger planet, and the disk, the point in the center, or the small circle in the center. It must also have, over a long time, come to be used by Egyptian writers of hieroglyphic language to mean simply the sun we see today. In other words, it was read by Egyptians as the sun whose reliable rising in the east and setting in the west were symbols of stability and sempiternity. An older understanding of a glyph had faded into a newer one. As an example of this latter meaning, here is the famous adoration of Ra at the beginning of the papyrus of Ani. Adoration of Ra when he riseth in the eastern horizon of heaven. Can you see the circle with the dot at the center, just as one of 5 components of a glyph over the second word Ra, all right? So we have it spelled with a mouth and an arm, Ra. We have the picture, Ra, and then we have the symbol of a god. All right. So this is a perfectly normal use of it in Egyptian language. Let me use this one cosmic glyph now to unveil the 4 somewhat cryptic participial nouns or gerunds which form my subtitle: remembering, assimilating, easing, forevering. Taken as an ensemble, I will argue, they bring to the surface some of the deepest patterns of meaning in Egyptian texts, and in no instance better than in the process by which this glyph comes to mean our daily sun. I will give examples of these gerunds at work from 2 representative sets of Egyptian writing, an earlier and a later. The first from the pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom, specifically from the spells of the Pyramid of Unas, the oldest to contain inscriptions. By the way, here you can see a reconstruction, the funerary temple leading down to the Nile, the causeway, the mortuary temple greeting the body or sarcophagus. And then if you look at the schematic diagram, once you've arrived at the entrance, you can see a burial chamber. I don't know if I should get into using this or not, but the sarcophagus is brought through here. It arrives at a burial chamber, and the ritual of resurrection is to get the king's body out of the sarcophagus at this western side and move into this eastern side, from which Polarists will be happy to remember there is an exit for the king's soul headed north. All right? Inside you can see how splendidly preserved the hieroglyphs are. There's stars on the ceiling and various designs here, but then if you look at most of the wall, it's perfectly preserved hieroglyphs, only a one break, and this is as though you are reading in the world's oldest book, because most stable book. The pyramid has no space into which to collapse, so it remains stable, and the glyphs are in stone and legible, and we can read them today. The second set of inscriptions is from the Book of the Heavenly Cow in the New Kingdom. I will show you the Heavenly Cow right now. It is from seen on in a number of New Kingdom tombs, most particularly the Hall of Columns in the tomb of Seti I. And to get a better glance, you can see how the cow is heavenly or celestial, because the bark of the sun goes across it like this and sets there. We will come to the story about how this cow became the heaven on which the sun moved in just a moment. I want to make clear that by using Old and New Kingdom examples, I am just, by the way, making a point that there's no essential difference between the two. In other words, don't expect that I will find in the pyramid texts secrets about the ancient sky different than those I find in the New Kingdom texts. All right? This is one pattern I see earlier and later. So, let me, in a way, in a preliminary way, go through my gerunds with examples in the order in which I've arranged them. I will then use examples from my two sets of texts to show their evident pattern of meaning in the Egyptian mind and proceed from there. The first gerund, remembering, designates the narrating of these anomalous events in the sky which affected the earth catastrophically. Egyptian literature is curiously deficient in straightforward tales of world destruction by celestial beings. More often in Egypt, such events are just alluded to in a cryptic phrase, cryptic if the reader does not already know the story. But both a narrative and an allusion are forms of remembering, and I will treat both as such by looking at my two chosen texts. Assimilating, next, is my word for the omnipresent spells by which the deceased becomes one god or another, in simple declarations such as, I am Ra. Such assimilation is to be seen in all mortuary texts, not just royal ones. As god of the dead, Osiris has pride of place in the Book of the Dead, which anyone wealthy enough could commission a scribe to fashion for his tomb. In the well-known Papyrus of Ani, from which I showed you the first line a second ago, we read incessantly of Osiris Ani doing this or that in the next world. Osiris, Ani, converted into the god Osiris, assimilated into the great god. In the pyramid texts, the king is commonly assimilated into the being of the greatest of all gods, Atum. My third term, easing, is a short word for a lovely process. It refers to the many ways in which the deceased is said to be at peace and at ease. Peace consists of doing things deemed pleasant in Egyptian life, sailing in a stately bark or barge such as a god might sail in, smelling a lotus, playing a board game, wandering in pleasant fields such as the Greeks would call Elysian. These mortuary texts allude occasionally to catastrophes in the foretime, the combat between Horus and Seth, or the raging of the eye of the sun or the eye of Horus. But for the most part, they speak of present and eternally recurrent serenity. The eye of Horus is declared to have been returned to the deceased. Like Horus, the deceased has been judged by the court of the gods and found vindicated. As reward for his purity, the deceased has spells for mounting to the very bark of the sun itself. There he is said perpetually to traverse the sky from east to west, in the company of this most radiantly visible God of the present. The idea of a perpetual present takes me to my last gerund, a word I made up, forevering. I use it as a transitive verb for what the spells of the scribes mean to effect for the deceased. The king will live for millions of years in eternity and everlastingness. He has entered a state of being which is totally secure and whose changes are only those of a cosmos dominated by the unending circling of the sun. Psychologically, one may say that all anxiety, whether triggered by memory of world destruction or by the thought of personal death, has been allayed. And once we admit psychological thinking, it is easy to go further in analyzing the true dynamic of this forevering. It is denial, a denial enabling amnesia, forgetting. So now let's go through quotations from the two sets of texts I mentioned at the beginning, each of which represents one or more of the four processes to which these two texts are devoted. In a brief paper such as this one, you must of course take my word for it that I have not been selective for my own purposes. I submit that my reading of either of these two texts in their totality, the Book of the Heavenly Cow or the Pyramid of Unas, will find that my four gerunds are the dominant themes, and that they are representative of the body of Egyptian mortuary texts as a whole. So, we begin with remembering, to be read par excellence in the tomb of Seti I, in the narrative of Hathor's destruction of mankind, a story dear to all catastrophists for its explicitness. Ra, the self-begotten and self-created, and the creator of mankind by the weeping of his eye, had grown old and weary, and it had come to his attention that humans were complaining of his age and plotting against him. The council of the gods approved his response, that his eye be brought to him with all its destructive power. Let your eye go forth, advised the council, and destroy for you those who revile you with slander. For there is no eye whatsoever that can go before it and resist it when it makes its progress in the form of Hathor. Hathor, in another version, then went forth as Sekhmet, slew the rebels, so many of them that Ra repented and called her back. Come in peace, Hathor, for the work is accomplished. But the goddess found the destruction of humans too sweet to stop. She waded about in their blood until a divine ruse distracted her. Mandrakes and deer were added to the human blood she had shed and mashed into a potent brew which made her so drunk that she lost her interest in her rampage. A remnant of human beings were left in which Ra took no more interest. This narrative contains all the elements found around the world for a great memory of destruction visited by sky beings on inhabitants of the earth. A high God becomes cognizant of the vicious imperfections of the humans he created. Through his agency, some being from the sky destroys vast portions of humanity. In the end, though, the God repents and relents, enough for some humans to be alive to tell the tale of to their descendants, and in so doing, deposit some kind of meaning for it. When we look for remembering now in the texts of the Pyramid of Unas, we find the great catastrophes only tersely alluded to, in spells whose primary purpose is to facilitate the king's rebirth and felicity. Since these spells are often repeated in later pyramids than that of Unas, with the name of different pharaohs inserted, I will generalize by referring not to Unas, but simply to the king. In one extended passage, the spells repeatedly begins, "King, accept the eye of Horus." The vicissitudes of that eye, above all in the combat between Horus and Seth, are then named in a set of phrases. "Accept the eye of Horus, which went away, which Seth trampled, which he pulled out, which he carried off, on which he caused devastation, which escaped from Seth, which he rejoined." In the so-called resurrection ritual, by which the sarcophagus is brought into the final burial chamber, the king's herald tells him to go to your father, to Atum, who has given birth to Horus in his identity as the one at which the earth shakes and the sky trembles. In such language, there is never an overtly narrative intent. The phrases of the spell subsume the past and are always aimed at transformation of the king in the present. Eye of Horus, become high and big towards the king. Behold, king, you are more sole and more in control than the gods of the Nile. Remembering thus is for the sake of transforming cosmic disturbance, and in so doing of bringing the king to ease, control, exaltation. My next gerund, assimilating, refers to the recurrent assertion that the deceased is some godhead or other. The proportion between narrative and spell are reversed in my New Kingdom and Old Kingdom texts. The New Kingdom Book of the Heavenly Cow consists mostly of the elaborate narrative I have summarized. After Hathor's all but total destruction of mankind, we next read of the old son's determination to retire. What he wants, it turns out, is to distance himself from earth and humans and to mount up to a new sky, one provided for him by Nut, at his command in the form of a cow. Nut trembled because of the new height of the sky, so Ra decreed that supports of the sky come into being. Only after a complex narrative of the instating of a new world order does the instruction briefly turn to the deceased and provide him with spells to assimilate him to a godhood. I am this pure magic which is in the mouth and in the body of Ra. I am Ra, the luminous one. I am Ra amid his court, his nine made of magic. I pass by uninjured. I belong to the flame, which is the soul of fire. Thus, you see, narrative morphs into spells by which assimilation to Ra is consummated. In the Old Kingdom, the spells of the pyramid texts are likewise aimed at assimilating the deceased into multiple gods. They contain no extended narrative, but abound in such assimilations. The spells have one difference from our New Kingdom texts. In the pyramid texts, the king assimilates himself not just into the gods of creation and regularity, but also the ferocious gods who have shown themselves capable of wreaking havoc in the cosmos. Sometimes he takes on Horus's face and destructive power. The king will come with his face, that of the great God who is Lord of rage, who grew strong from the injury to him. Horus will grant you the fire of his eye, that it circle you round, that it put tempest among the evildoers, put it swell under the primordial gods. He will strike Shu's arms from under the sky. This is one hieroglyphic text where at the very end of the second line you can see for transformations into Horus, and the last hieroglyph is the falcon. All right. Sometimes Horus is mentioned only in the background, and the king's threatening presence in the sky is acclaimed as something unseen before. Shaking in the sky, we saw something new, say the primordial gods. Court of the nine gods, Horus is in the light. The king will take hold of the sky, will open its orb. The king is bane. Sometimes the king spreads terror all on his own. The king is bane to the heart, is the son of Shu's heart, extended to the limit with scorching light. The king is the fire in the top of the wind, to the sky's limit, to the earth's limit, when the arms of the lightning bolts have become discharged by him. Need I stress here that the terror is an electrical phenomenon. I now enter the second half of my proposed structuring, easing and forevering, the two gerunds which move away from terror into modes of forgetting it. Listen to the sweet details of ease inserted at the final stretch of narrative in the Book of the Heavenly Cow, in a spell efficacious for whoever shall recite the words of this composition. Behind his ears shall be pure natron, and sweet-smelling salve shall be on his lips. He shall be arrayed in a new double tunic, and his body shall be purified with the water of the Nile. Easing in the Book of the Heavenly Cow has as its conclusion spells to enable the deceased to move around after death. Some of its promises are negative sentences of protection, such as, I pass by uninjured, I belong to the flame, which is the soul of fire. I have no adversaries among men, God's spirits, among the dead, or at anything in the whole of this land. Others make more positive promises. As for anyone who knows the divine words and the spells in his mouth, he can ascend and descend within the sky. The entire composition comes to an end with such promises, short but decisive in stressing the ease the deceased may enjoy through its spells. To turn to the pyramid text, there this easing of the king is not always purged entirely of catastrophic consciousness. As so often in any court, the king's power may be part of his beauty, as in this spell. How fair the sight, how pleasant the beholding, the gods say, of this God's going forth to the sky. Atop him his souls, at his sides his terror, at his feet his magic. More often, though, the serenity of the king is wedded to his ascent to the company of the heavenly deities in orderly movement. You shall become clean in the cool waters of the stars, shall board the bark of Ra on the shoulders of Horus. O ferryman who faces forward, fetch for the king the ladder whose name is salve of contentment on the back of Osiris, that the king go forth to the sky upon it, that he escort Ra in the sky. We come at last to the gerund I made use of, forevering. In the Book of the Celestial Cow, the most striking affirmation of the king will take his place forever in the order of the new cosmos occurs in an illustration on the wall. There the king, shown 3 times with his skirt and his uraeus, joins the company of a male god, eternity, and a female god, everlastingness. And in both cases, the activity is holding up the sky with a support. To show you the next slide, here more particularly are the eternity with the name thereof below it, him, and everlastingness with the name below here. So they are joining the king in holding up the sky. All 3, like Shu, support the new sky which Ra has mandated, and which is now made up of the sky goddess Nut as a cow, in which to whose body Ra has retired from earth and the underworld. The accompanying spells convey the same message. The one who recites this spell shall live in the necropolis, and respect for him shall be greater than for those who are upon earth. If they ask, what are your names? The answer is eternity and everlastingness. Then they are bound to say, This is truly a God. The language could not be clearer that there is a new world order and that it is to last forever. What we see at the end of the book of the Heavenly Cow occurs far more often throughout the pyramid text. There, the celestial melding of serenity and orderly motion leads naturally to an assertion that the new order brought about by the king's arrival in the sky will be stable and at ease forever on heaven and earth alike. He will remain undisturbed by any memory of terrifying phenomena. The king's house in the sky shall never perish. The king's seat on the earth will never end. Most tenderly, the king becomes the son of Atum-Ra in a perpetual embrace. Atum-Ra, your son has come to you. The king has come to you. Exalt him to you. Encircle him with your arms. This is the son of your body forever. We have the same archetype here as Christ returning to sit forever at the right hand of the Father. So, I have proposed a schematic separation of spells into 4 processes or 4 gerunds, but we have already seen some overlapping, and my survey would not be complete without giving you one example in which all 4 gerunds are conflated from the pyramid text. The king has come from the Isle of Flame. The king has put order in the place of chaos. The king is he who owns the linens guarded by the cobra of fire during the night of the great flood that comes from the great goddess. The king will appear as the fair god, as the water lily at the nose of Ra, when he comes forth from the place of radiance every day. There is an implicit remembering of a deluge brought by a major deity during the night of the flood that comes from the great goddess. Note also that the king is implicitly assimilated into Ra or Horus in his possession of the uraeus to spit fire at his enemies. But most of the imagery invokes pleasurable ease. The king appears as the beautiful water lily, which Ra smells on his coming forth. And the final phrase constitutes the purest of affirmations of what I have called forevering, when he comes forth from the place of radiance every day. Here we have as concise an affirmation as of the assuringly recurrent as any that Egyptian culture was accustomed to make. Every day, Ra-Neb, as I said at the beginning, is more literally every sun, and the same disk with a circle at the center of it is used in the spelling of Ra when he smells the water lily's fragrance. The kinds of language I have quoted throughout will not be unfamiliar to anyone who has had any exposure to Egyptian civilization. This civilization claims a long memory of the past. It is replete with humans who are or who become divinities. Its elite is everywhere depicted in positions of ease, except perhaps when a pharaoh sallies forth in a decisive battle which annihilates an enemy army, such as Dave showed us images of. I would simply stress that it is the last of my 4 gerunds which is the best known. Egypt has long presented to the world a lapidary facade of stability and perdurable order. It is a prestige deferred to by such venerable Greek visitors as Solon, Herodotus, and Plato. In conclusion, I wish to set up a paradox consisting of 2 terms which seem at first incompatible, but on further inspection are complementary. The first term I take from Thunderbolts of the Gods. We would not be going too far to suggest that civilization itself was a bursting forth of new and creative forms of remembering, all harking back to some aspect of a primeval conflict between order and chaos. second term of my paradox is one known to any philosopher of memory, namely, that we remember some things only by forgetting others. Memory has to be selective in order not to overwhelm us. So I would add to the truth of Talbot and Thornhill's sentence another truth, that civilization was also a bursting forth of new and creative forms of forgetting through selectivity. And selectivity about remembering the past can lead to denial about what is possible in the future. The primary denial in Egyptian culture is that the New World Order established by Ra's removal to the sky, described in the Book of the Celestial Cow, could ever again be undone. The Pharaoh himself is depicted as helping eternity and everlastingness hold up the sky in the illustration of this book on the tomb walls. If the deceased is to accompany Ra in his bark's perpetual daily traversal from rising to setting, and if daily is expressed in the two words every sun, then there is nothing to be feared in the future. The Egyptian afterlife may resemble that of the blessed in the Christian heaven, but there is no apocalypse or last judgment preceding the consummation of Christian beatitude and the beatific vision. For cultures with a profounder sense of the fragility of the cosmos, in which man is but the servant of the gods and a gloomy underworld is our last station, one does better to turn to the civilizations of Greece and Mesopotamia. In Egypt, forevering becomes a form of forgetting. Thank you.